Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 115.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores. Roughly a month ago, I was on a Facebook post where someone mentioned Gordon Morrison, an advanced PGA professional from Northumbria, United Kingdom, who is doing a PhD thesis project on the Yips. Most of you who listen to this podcast know I have personally experienced the Yips, and so I took a look at Gordon's website and found a lot of fascinating information there. Gordon agreed to do this interview with me, and he shared much great information related to the Yips and to his thesis efforts and things that he has learned, and also how he helps golfers who have a variety of types of Yips. So please enjoy this fascinating interview with Gordon Morrison. What a treat it was to get to talk with him. Hello, this is Tony Wright with episode 115 of the Golf Improvement Podcast. It's a real pleasure today to speak with advanced PGA professional Gordon Morrison from Northumbria in the United Kingdom. Gordon was named a Golf World Top 100 teacher, I believe, in the world in 2012. He has a really interesting background. He has a specialty in how people learn skills for golf. He's an advisor in sports psychology and motor learning to the Norwegian Golf Federation. But maybe of most interest today, he's working on a PhD thesis topic related to the Yips. And as you mentioned, before, it takes time to get through those things. So I guess it'll be kind of fun to talk about some of the things about where you are related to that, Gordon. Thank you very much for speaking with me and my listeners today.
Lovely. Thank you very much for the invitation. Looking forward to the questions and giving you a response.
Great. Well, I always like to start out with a little bit of having people talk about their personal story. So talk a little bit about how you became a golf professional and also how you decided on a thesis topic related to the Yips and golf.
Sure. Probably a familiar story to many people. I'm Irish, so I did my training as a golf professional in Ireland after, failing to be a successful player and wanted to be still involved with golf. So that's how I fell into being a golf professional, did my training. And as time went on, developed more interest in teaching and realized I wasn't very good at it. Well, wasn't very good at getting people to improve. I could improve swings, but not performance so much. So that led eventually to picking up some books on motor learning, and that was like a veil was lifted. Really, I wasn't aware of any of this information, and from there I decided to sort of just to, I don't know, what would you say, rubber stamp my knowledge. I went to do a sports psychology master's, and within that did a specialized thesis on skill acquisition for golf. And I mean, I went in there with some knowledge and I came out with a lot more. And so during that, I started thinking about and experiencing, as we all do as coaches, people who had the Yips. And looking at people who had it, I'm thinking, wow, this is the ultimate breakdown of skill. Something that was previously possible is now no longer possible. And it's common across sports and other endeavors. But, I'm thinking, well, this is the ultimate conundrum here. This is the ultimate
the ultimate challenge, right? To do a thesis on it.
And so, it was kind of a motor learning stroke sports psychology PhD that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm I suppose approaching halfway through that, but and I also acquired the yips in my handwriting. It's called writer's cramp, which is not common these days because we don't write so much. So that sparked my interest in the yips because I had something myself that I could relate to. That's
wow, that's very interesting. You said right at the beginning, everybody's almost everybody I interview at some level says something about, they were a failure at something, and yet, I mean, you're really a success because you learned to do something different, and maybe it's better than what you had done had you, been maybe a tour professional or something. I can't say that for sure for you, but I suspect from a little bit I know that you're enjoying what you're doing. So
yes, very much so. I mean, I'm probably like a lot of coaches. I think it's the problem solving is the attraction. There's a problem to be solved and you need to work it out. And that's the attraction. Mind you, with the yips, it's a fair old problem, that's for sure. And working out an answer is, I think it's going to be a long time. And at least if I can help people to live with the problem while we figure out exactly what it is, then great.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about, some of the basics. How do you presently define the yips, and in particular, some of the differences you see in golfers who have putting yips and chipping yips? Most people don't talk about chipping yips as much as they do about putting yips. Isn't that correct?
That's for sure. And if you're a student and you've got access to university databases for research, you'll find plenty on putting yips, but you'll find virtually nothing on chipping yips. You might find a study I did about 4 years ago, but that's the only thing there is. So defining it, I would say almost what I said previously about something that was previously possible is now no longer possible or has great difficulty. And I think that covers a multitude, but it's the movement characteristics that interest me between putting and chipping yips, because putting yips is, there's not many things that are 100% in life, but it almost seems like 100% certain the putting yips is a dominant hand problem.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the dominant hand is rotating the blade at impact, at speed, and in an uncontrolled way. And then the other hand seems to be almost performing eventually an anti-yip. And players can get really confused as to which hand it's in, but certainly the culprit is the right hand, and it's a rapid rotation of the wrist. And that's researched by some German scientists that showed that 3 or 4 years ago. And then chipping yips has not got a clear movement characteristic as compared to putting yips, but provisionally my research would say that it's like a ground evasion or a ground avoidance movement. So it's not a rotational problem. It's not in the dominant hand. It's, in fact, they can chip fine one-handed, almost everyone. But putting yippers can't. That's the assist. They can't putt one-handed with their dominant hand. So chipping yips is more like as if the club is coming into the ground, and then about 10 inches before the ball, the movement seems to be up initially, as if to avoid the ground.
Yeah.
And then like a second guessing takes place around the ball, where they try to replant the club on the ground quite quickly. And that's when you see the knee bending that a lot of people associate with it, I think.
Yeah.
So get the wrists really for chipping yips is what I see. We'll have a clear definition on that soon. I've done the 3D analysis. We just have to look at it and figure it all out. But it looks like the wrists are moving in a peculiar manner yet to be defined, and then the knees bend to add, I don't know, insult to injury around impact.
Insult to injury. That's interesting. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen any things or you follow some of the stuff. James Ridyard, I believe he's also,
yes.
And he did a recent video with some people about, when he works with people, trying to get people to not get so ball focused, right? And maybe that's going to be some of the things that come in. But I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to come out of the 3D analysis. That's going to be very interesting.
That should help. I mean, I know James, and I'm not over familiar with what he's saying about it, but I know there's a movement characteristic I think that he identifies, and I think that's important that we do. If there is one universal movement characteristic, like in the putting yips, then we need to discover that, and that maybe, possibly then you can circumvent the problem.
Yeah.
In some way. I'm not sure how, like you can in putting yips, but at the moment in chipping yips, there's just so many degrees of freedom available to the body to try and get the club to avoid hitting the ground or to hit the ground appropriately, that it's just, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Well, a fruitful thesis topic. So there you go. So maybe a little bit about, I mean, do you have a title for your thesis work yet, or kind of thinking through that, or maybe what the specific topic is, if you have identified that, and talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, initially it was the first phase of the study was to try and define let's say how it develops. Is there a pattern in chipping yips? This is the study.
Yeah.
And mainly, is there a pattern to how that develops in players? The etiology, and that's come up with kind of divided results. Really, nothing clear. Nothing clear. Say, well, everybody does this or everybody does that. And it's moving now into the movement characteristics. If we can define them clearly, that would be good. I mean, if they're different for everyone, then that probably makes a bit more sense as everybody moves a little differently anyway. And then finally, there'll be a treatment phase. I've already trialed some treatments within the experiment on the movement characteristics. So I'm hoping that, let's just say, I shouldn't say hope, I'm waiting to see if the treatments that I'm trialing can be scientifically validated.
Yeah.
So that's where it is. So it'll probably finish with a longer term treatment of a number of individuals, and hopefully reduction of their movement characteristics and chipping yips. Sort
of where the rubber meets the road is what your, I guess, thesis advisor is going to say. At the end we have to really have shown that we figured something out, right? Yeah,
that's right. And it's, I think, naively, I mean, as a golf professional, speaking for myself, I think we believe there's a cure for everything out there. We can fix people, and whereas with scientific work, I think you have to be realistic. If we could establish movement characteristics and then also start the process of treating this problem, and with some success, then I think that would be a successful PhD.
Yeah. Well, you have an interesting thing on your website that is part of your study that I think is kind of neat, and that is you have a survey for people who suffer from the yips. And I hope, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to that for anybody that's listening that, can contribute to that, because I think it's a great way to collect stuff. Any particular things from the responses that you've seen that you want to share, and maybe any surprises from the responses to that survey? Yeah.
Well, it's up over 500 people now, so that's quite a lot, really, worldwide this is, but still I've got 500, whatever you want to call yippers, let's call them, on my books, and then it's a captive audience to maybe potentially do some research with, because research that can be done with pen and paper, questionnaires could be emailed out to everyone. So it's a large sample. I think I'll give you a summary of what I've discovered from that. Of these 500, about 50% report a sudden start to the yips, and the other 50% can't remember or suggest it was over a longer period of time. And that's surprising, because as a pro myself, I thought everybody just has a day, a date, and a time that they can say, oh yeah, that was my first yip on the 16th green at whatever golf club, but that doesn't seem to be true. And of everyone, about 50-50 say that. And then of those 50% who did report a sudden start, only 1 in 3 of them said it was in a competition. The others said, "Oh no, I was practicing," and that was surprising, because I'm thinking, right, A, I thought everyone would know the day it started, and B, they would all say I was under pressure at the time, but that doesn't seem to be true, which is leading us away a little bit from anxiety which I know is one thing you wanted to talk to me about.
Yeah, right.
Anxiety.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Some guys were pros, and they said, I was out in my own practice area, just chipping a few balls, and I suddenly couldn't hit the ball. I fluffed it, I thinned it, and I've had the problem ever since. And so, they weren't under any pressure. They were just relaxed. They were just not even practicing that intensely, some of them, and suddenly this thing is a problem. And another thing that's maybe surprising is that 12% of these people, so that's 60 people, are long game yippers. People who've got driving yips or something similar. Sometimes it's in the irons, but it's mainly off the tee. And that seems very similar to chipping in the sense that maybe I'll get into that a little later, but putting yips occurs no matter what. You can't stop it. You could putt one-handed with your right hand and you can't hide it. It's impossible. Whereas with chipping and driving yips, people can be fine for a few shots, perfect actually, and then boom, back it comes, and you have a full-blown yip out of the blue.
Yeah.
So they seem a little different. Putting seems more like my handwriting yips. It seems to maybe be developed through like overuse. And then whereas chipping yips seems like, to me anyway, so far, it looks like a partial breakdown of something that used to be automatic.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I think is so, and I hope maybe you designed it that way, but if you make presumptions about what the cause is, right? I mean, the only way to find out is to hear from people about different things. And I mean, just the fact that you learned some of those things about pressure or no pressure, or they knew or didn't know when it started, is like, there's such great indicators of things to pursue, right? Absolutely. You have to try. I mean, that's a big problem for me, is when I'm writing up the researches, I have to admit you're biased. You're a golf professional for 25 years and you have these unconscious biases, and you have to try and leave them out and be open-minded. Try not to influence the research with your views. And I think probably the last thing I'd say, that about 1/3 of those people, like 170, 180, have got both putting and chipping yips. Huh.
So that's quite common to have this, whatever you want to call it, two problems. And given that they're quite different movement-wise, I mean, that's surprising. Many years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago, a researcher said to me, "Oh, you'll find that the chipping yips is the same as the putting yips. It'll be a dominant hand problem." And even then, I had suspicions, because I knew people were chipping one-handed, and I said, "Well, I don't think so." But yet, people can suffer with both. I mean, a large number of people suffer with both.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember it. I did do the survey, and I remember the exact time, the exact place when it started. Yes. It was so interesting. But I also, at least, whether it's true or not, I think I saw, if you look back, some precursors that I had a terrible time for a number of months controlling speed on putts.
Right.
And somehow I think there may be some connection, and you don't necessarily have to get into it. But I'm dabbling about my personal experience a little bit. But there was no question. It was a 10-foot putt at a certain day, and boom, it started, and it's like, whoa, what is this?
That's that it was a 10-foot putt, because again, I would challenge some of the conventional wisdom is that it only happens on 3-foot putts or putts of that length. And I mean, I've not seen that. I mean, if you get them to put one-handed from 30 feet, it's there. Yeah, they can disguise it. I mean, it's amazing. The non-dominant hand starts to develop like an antidote, if you like. Yeah. And I've played with some professionals over the years, and they were yipping for sure, but they seem to be managing it somehow. So that's been an interesting sort of observation as well.
Yeah.
I think it's there. I don't believe it's that context specific that it disappears at 6 feet and then reappears at 3. That's doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, it was there at 3. It was there at 10. It was there at 20. But there you go.
So, a question for you then, Tony, and this is something that comes with people, many people that I meet. Have you ever experienced it in any other occupations or any other sports, for example?
Not that I know of. I played a lot of basketball when I was young. A lot of shooting, things like that. But my sport, at least since I've gotten out of school, has really pretty much always been golf. I mean, I write a lot. I type on the computer. I wonder, do some people get the yips when they're typing on the computer too?
I've not heard that, but I've got a list somewhere.
That would be an interesting one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, possibly. There's 78 known sports and occupations that are affected, so there's a large number. There is some consistency across things like for example, in tennis and table tennis, it's a four-handed problem, a bit like the putting yips. So, and in throwing, there's like in cricket here where I live in England, cricket's a big sport, and the bowlers there, they start letting go of the ball at the wrong time, like way too early, way too late. And I think that's the same in darts, where people get this dartitis, they call it. They just can't let go of the dart at the right time. And so see some consistency across tasks, but between putting and chipping yips, even though they're quite similar, like the task is quite similar, they don't seem to have the same movement characteristics.
Fascinating. Well, let's move on to another part of this, and that is, I know you're working on specific things related to your thesis, but maybe talk a little bit about what you typically see or use as some standard cures or approaches for helping people with putting yips. But then maybe if there are any other non-standard things that are sort of out of the realm of what you're doing for your thesis work, because I probably don't want to talk about that, but talk about cures for a bit.
Yeah, I see people on a fairly regular basis, professionals, amateurs, to try and help them. And if we start with putting, I mean, because we know it's a dominant hand problem, and as soon as that's established with the player, some I don't know whether we're stigmatizing people by saying you've got the yips, but I would say, look, you have this movement problem, and there's options here. Option one, I can circumvent it with the so-called claw or saw grip if it's really severe, or we can put your left hand on, but your right hand just sits there like a ghost. It is touching, but not a lot. The club, you have to be really close to see it, but basically take the right hand out of the stroke, which I think you've done yourself with your claw grip, have you?
Right. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So that almost seems like a certain cure. I mean, if they're very severe, the claw sometimes doesn't work, and you have to use the saw, which is a much more like the palm of your hand faces your stomach, your elbow is pointing directly away from the hole, really awkward looking, but it stops it then because the wrist can't rotate from that position. So that would be the easy one. And most people say, yeah, thanks very much. I can putt again. And you only see them once, maybe.
Yeah.
Or if it's somebody who's early doors and they've just noticed it last week, I would, because they rotate the face open at impact, putting yippers. That's my observation anyway. I would just encourage them to adopt more of what you would probably term an arcing stroke, as opposed to trying. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the straight line stroke. You meet lots of straight line strokers who definitely don't have the yips, but some of the people attempting that start to open the face as part of the way they're trying to do this type of stroke.
Well, it's kind of a manipulation. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to hold it through the thing, you almost have to open it a little bit, right?
Yeah, and you'll see that I've Sam Putt Lab, which I use to help the diagnosis of the yips in putting, but you can use it in short chips too. And you'll see the rotations are inconsistent. And if the rotations are inconsistent, they're maybe not yipping, but they're certainly doing movement that resembles it. And So I would just teach them to rotate the putter, and they do that with their right hand from short range, and where there's no yip, it might even be just right next to the hole from an inch, and then build it up gradually. Move back a ball. I'd say do it slowly, a ball a week, a ball's width a week, and just retrain the movement. It's a technique called motor retuning, which has been used successfully by the guy who invented the SamLab, Christian Marquand. He adopts that policy successfully at times, I believe. And
he and I actually talked, and he gave me a couple of his ideas when we talked. He was very kind to do that. So
yes, he's a clever man, and I would certainly have more on his side of his research on the yips. I would be more with his take that it's some kind of movement problem. Maybe undefined, but certainly we can say what it is. It's a rapid rotation of the wrist, uncontrolled. So anything that would help that would seem useful. So that's the two approaches, this kind of motor retuning, which is like slowly rebuilding a different type of movement, or just, take the claw or the saw and it'll still be there, your yip, but it won't be able to influence your stroke.
So then on the chipping end, maybe a little bit there too.
Yeah. I would say completely different, because with the putting yips, I've tried to use some concentration-based tasks, as I've been using which I'll explain now about the chipping yips, and they have no effect. I mean, if you have a putting yipper and you have them do a secondary task, as they putt, they do something else, which diverts their attention, they still yip. Whereas with a chipping yipper, if I can sufficiently divert their attention to some secondary task, largely a dissociative task. For example, if they just say some words as they chip, like they might say swing as they swing back, and then they say smooth on the downswing until the ball's struck, and then they say land when the ball actually does land. I've had quite a lot of success with that, where you're diverting attention away from the task, certainly directly from the task. And with most, if they perform the secondary task well, the movement quality is greatly improved and the shot quality improves. So it's like the chipping yip seems to be a partial breakdown of automatic processes. It just seems that if I keep them busy enough, then the default program for chipping is alive and well in there, and it kicks in. And that's the best way I can describe it. And amazingly, some people have recovered completely, but admittedly, I got them early. They only had started to complain of problems. Some people I treat have had it 30 years, and that technique still helps them. I'm not going to say it cures them, but the biggest problem they have is adherence to the secondary task, especially when they're under pressure. The anxiety, if it plays a role, what it does is it makes it hard to concentrate. There's a part of our brain that deals with concentration, and anxiety disrupts its processes. So I would say anxiety makes the yips worse because it disrupts concentration.
Yeah.
And, so I start off with very much disassociative tasks. Like if any of you guys have read The Inner Game of Golf by Timothy Galway, it's an old book.
Oh, yeah.
I use some of Galway's principles in the inner game, some of his exercises like the humming or the back hit, any of those things at all, I would suggest they're useful. I mean, we're trying to develop deeper treatments because, like anything else, you could get so used to saying back hit or doing the humming that becomes automatic, and now you have sufficient attention to start yipping again. So that's a worry. So I try and develop flexible secondary tasks with players. So they've got a selection of 2 or 3 that they use. They don't use the same one all the time, because if they did, they run the risk of doing it automatically. That is the second task. So yeah, more or less, if you can disassociate the player from the task, keep them busy, then movement quality seems to improve a lot.
Well, you said something in the middle of that just, freaked me out. You said some people have had the yips for 30 years, and my 2 comments on that would be, oh my gosh, how brave they are to continue to play golf.
Yeah.
With struggling with that, but how great it is that there are people, like you and others that are trying to help people with solutions so that they can enjoy something that they just love, right?
Absolutely. I've got a small pilot group that they're the guinea pigs. It's not an official part of the study, so I experiment on these people. And one of them is in their 80s. And this lady is a good player, still a good player, like about a 9 handicap. And she's done well. She's reacted well to that basic premise of, disassociate from the task and stay busy, commit to the secondary task. And at the same time as you're chipping, and it seems to have gone quite well. So yeah, you get all age groups as well. It doesn't seem to be like it's not an old person's disease exactly, or a young person's. It seems to affect all ages.
I had a guy that I played with that I just gave him a couple of suggestions, and every time for the last 2 months, and I had to be careful because I'm not an expert in this, right? But he says, "Oh my God, I can't believe it!" He's just so ecstatic about it. But well, the next couple of questions relate a little bit to some of my experiences, but I think that they're relative important to talk about. And one of them, in my own, I don't want to say getting through the yips, I struggled a little bit for a while. I was saying, "Oh my God, I don't want to use a claw grip. That just doesn't, seem right?" Right? I mean, it's not a quote unquote conventional grip. Yep. And all of a sudden, I woke up and said, "Oh my God, watch how many people on tour or anywhere use something that you might consider non-conventional. There's nothing wrong with this." Do you experience any people that sort of have that view of it? Say, "Oh my goodness, I don't want to do that."
Yeah, it's like been if it was Arnold Palmer, I suppose, or someone like that, I think they would persevere on with conventional stuff because that's just the way they're wired up. But I think as these days, there must be less stigma to it. You've got guys like Mark O'Meara, for example, who was an excellent putter and developed the putting yips, and on the advice of Hank Haney and somebody he was working with, they suggested the claw. And if it's good enough for someone like that who was a great putter to swallow his pride and do it, then I think it's good enough for everyone. But for a tour player, it's a matter of do I make money playing golf or not? And for the ordinary golfer, it's do I want to continue to look stupid on 2-foot putts, maybe even 1-foot putts. So I think there is a stigma, but not as much as there was, because so many pros are using alternative grips, let's say.
Yeah, I think, it's great. And the change, and if anything in my putting, I see elements that are better than they've been in a year or two. So, I can't argue with that. The other end, and you talked a little bit about this, and I look forward to hearing more about it, is I just believe that somewhere in there being less anxious was an important element. Now, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but I took it more about, there's a number of things going on in my life, that have maybe made me more anxious over the last year or two, and finding strategies to change that, I think were valuable, both life and golf, and so talk a little bit about anxiety in some of your studies and what you're seeing.
Yes. I mean, first of all, I interviewed at great length 10 people who were suffering from the yips, and of course they were all very anxious about chipping, but I'd say they're all very anxious now about chipping. They weren't before. Generally speaking, there were yippers are often people who were pretty good. So there was no anxiety before the problems. But to me, it seems like a consequence, largely anxiety is a consequence of the problem. But like I stated earlier, I mean, anxiety makes it difficult to concentrate. And so therefore it's causing problems anyway, especially with treatments to do with the yips, like my concentration-based treatments. If they find that hard to do the secondary task, I will teach them a little, anxiety reducing trick. Maybe that's if it's physical anxiety, it could be like progressive muscle relaxation where you tense and relax, or if it's more mental anxiety, you could do breathing techniques and some imagery to try and like at least bring the anxiety down a little bit, because it doesn't seem to help. Even though it may not be one of the causes, it's not helping people when they have it. So I think that, like you did, maybe if you tackle some of the issues around your anxiety, or maybe at least learn a way of dealing with them, that's helpful for sure in treating it.
Yeah. Regardless of the golf part, it helped me in a lot of areas, but that's another story. But, well, Gordon, you said some really great things for golfers, I think, today. I appreciate it very much. Let's end with two things. Maybe something that's really a couple things most satisfying about what you're doing related to the Yips and your thesis and things like that, in terms of things to help golfers, and any final words and guidance you want to pass on, just, sort of basic things that you want them to remember to help them.
Yeah, I think certainly with the putting Yips, it's how quickly you can deal with it. I think most golf coaches are really capable of dealing with that if they understand it's a dominant hand problem and they know how to circumvent it with the club. Well, they can give anyone a lesson at their club who's got the Yips, and it suggests it's about 1 in 4 golfers is suffering from something.
Jeez.
So it's quite a high number. It could even be higher than that, but people don't notice it. So many guys I meet say, "Oh, I'm not a great putter and I can't really chip." And what they mean is they've got the Yips, but they just haven't decided that. Secondly, then, when you see somebody who used to have fresh air shots when they were chipping,
yeah,
1 or 2 professionals who missed the ball, when they were trying to chip it. I mean, that must be traumatic for somebody who earns their living out of golf. And then, one that I can think of recently, she's started to say to me, "Look, I don't need as much support anymore. I'm no longer afraid of chipping, and actually I'm doing okay. I'm performing better in competition, and I've got the tools you've given me, and I'm going to stay in touch, but not so often." I thought, well, this is good, because otherwise you're going to see them forever and keep working on the same problems. So people do recover. That's maybe not everything, but they can become functional again, and that's satisfying, given that they went from fresh airing, whatever.
Oh, gosh, I've never heard that term in terms of it, but I can visualize it too. So,
oh yeah, and that must be very distressing. To say that they're no longer afraid of chipping. Well, that's satisfying. And the same with the driving Yips, can be really difficult to diagnose, but it's there too. And when people are able to, I saw a person I worked with recently, a professional, I saw them play 9 holes in a tournament and hit every fairway. I'm thinking, well, this is a bit different from the shots that were flying 100 meters right unexpectedly at one stage. It's quite a peculiar thing when you see it. Hitting out of bounds where no other player realized out of bounds was, that kind of thing. So it's nice to see people improve. But yeah, it's different. Some people improve fast, and some people improve much more slowly, and others are harder to help. But it's probably just like a normal day giving a lesson. Some are easy to work with, and some aren't. That's how it is.
Sure. Well, the person being able to accept ownership of where they are. I mean, you almost know that they're in good shape when they are able to do that, right? And
yep, absolutely. And probably with the chipping Yips, it's about concentration. So it's about learning the art of concentration, or certainly controlling your attention. That if you realize there are things you can do that, like if you're walking along the street and talking to someone, you're walking automatically. We find it very hard to do 2 things at once. That's difficult for us. So for the chipping Yippers, if they can just focus on something, disassociate themselves from the task, count backwards from 10, anything, almost anything, that would help to get their attention away from the ball. As you said about James Rudyard, they're trying to get them away from the ball. Well, it's like saying, forget this, forget that. You can't forget it, but you can focus on other stuff, and that takes up the space in your mind, and that protects you a little bit, because you're so busy with that you have temporarily forgotten maybe about something. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's the art of controlling attention. That's what needs to go on with the chipping and the driving yips.
Yeah. Well, this has really been a great, interesting interview, and I really appreciate you doing it. I'm going to put some links in the show notes, both to your website in general, but I hope people pick up, find that survey, anything I can do to help them do that. And, the more people can respond about things like that, the more you get insights that can help you, both help do your thesis, but help other people. I mean, it's good for everyone. That's right.
And I take emails, not on a daily basis, but almost daily basis. I get emails from random people, but based on maybe doing this, or they find my website, and I'm happy to exchange what I have by email. It'd be great if we could sort of help people. That's the main thing. So if somebody who has a question, I'll do my best to answer that as quick as I can.
Well, that's really great. Well, Gordon, we're going to end for now, but hang in for a second afterwards. But this has been a terrific interview for golfers, and again, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tony. Hopefully it'll go down well.
Oh, I forgot to say one final thing, and I'm going to do that. So you have an open invitation to come back when you have other things to share, okay, about what you're doing. I would love to get to talk with you again and have you share things with people, when you think it's the right time. So there you go.
Great. As soon as I have something, the ultimate goal is to educate PGA professionals to be able to treat the yips at their home clubs. That's the ultimate goal.
That's a tremendous goal to have. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Taking your game to new heights. www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Gordon, thanks for that interview. It's clear to me that you love what you're getting to do to help golfers who have the yips, and to find ways also to communicate that information to golfers and PGA teaching professionals. I put links in the show notes to Gordon's website and also to his Yips survey that is on his site. If you listen to this interview and haven't done so already, if you have the yips, please complete this survey and let others know who you know have the yips and ask them to do it. Every submission that he gets, I think, provides some insights that can help him to help more and more golfers. And I can't wait for Gordon to return again in the future to share new information with me and with you related to his thesis research and to helping golfers who suffer with yips. I've had a number of listeners who continue to provide suggestions to me for interesting people I can interview on the Golf Improvement Podcast. If you have any suggestions, please let me know at tony@gameimprovementgolf.com. Well, that's it for today. In 2 weeks, a return engagement with Dr. Christian Marquardt, developer of the Sam Putt Lab and a motor learning and performance expert. Christian will be talking about the new Sam Putt Lab tour reference data he's collected and provide some insights about what this data means to help golfers who want to improve their putting performance. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com